There are moments in life when you realize just how far you've fallen into the web of expectations and decisions made for you long before you even knew the path was being set. Today, I find myself standing on the precipice of such a moment. I'm about to step into a future I never imagined, one forged not by love or choice, but by necessity, by the weight of obligations I never wanted to carry. The story you're about to hear is not one of love, not one of passion, nor even desire. It's a story of fate, a story of being bound to something, someone, who I never chose. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. I never imagined myself here, trapped in a situation where love or even the hope of it had no place. But here I am, adjusting the cufflinks on my sleeve, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The man looking back at me isn't the one I recognize. The face is familiar, but the eyes, they no longer hold the same sense of freedom they once did. Those eyes are filled with a different kind of fear now. The fear of losing everything. You may be wondering how it all began. How did I end up in a position where love had nothing to do with it? How did I find myself here standing before you, about to do something I never wanted, all because of someone I never truly chose? It began with a family steeped in tradition, a family that, like so many others, placed heavy importance on the bonds that tie bloodlines together. They told me it was my duty, my responsibility to honor the name, to follow the rules, and to live by the customs passed down for generations. But somewhere in the midst of all that, they forgot one important thing. They forgot that love cannot be manufactured. It cannot be demanded, forced, or controlled. It is something that must come naturally, from the heart, from within. But that wasn't my choice. My parents, my family, they had already chosen for me. And when they decided that I would marry her, there was no room left for my own desires. There was no space for me to think about what I truly wanted, what I felt deep inside. My heart, though it ached with the desire for freedom, had to stand silent. My voice was drowned out by the demands of family, by the weight of their expectations. She wasn't the one I was waiting for. I hadn't even realized I was looking for her. When we met, she seemed like just another face in the crowd. She wasn't extraordinary in any way, at least not to me at first. But as time passed, something began to shift. I could see the love in her eyes, the quiet strength behind her smile, and I understood. This wasn't a woman I had chosen. This was a woman who was forced into my life by circumstance. And as she stood there waiting for me to make my decision, I realized that this wasn't just about me. This was about her too. I can't deny the truth any longer. She felt the same pressure I did. She felt the weight of tradition, the suffocating burden of expectations placed upon her. Her family too had a role for her to play, a place for her to occupy. And in that moment, as I looked into her eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Fear. Not the fear of marriage itself, but the fear of losing herself. The fear of being forced into something she couldn't control, just as I had been. In the silence between us, I heard her voice. It wasn't loud or demanding, but it was there, echoing in my mind. "I don't want this either," she had said. "I don't want to be married out of obligation." It was a revelation, one that shook me to my core. She wasn't just the woman I was about to marry. She was a victim of the same forces that had trapped me. Together we stood in a world that didn't care about what we wanted. It cared only about the preservation of tradition, of lineage, of family reputation. And now, the day had come where we would both be forced to walk down the aisle, bound by duty, not love. We spoke openly then for the first time. Our conversation was raw and uncertain, filled with vulnerability, but it was also a moment of clarity. She too had been pushed into a corner. She didn't want this marriage any more than I did. And in that instant, we realized that we were not enemies. We were allies. We were two souls, caught in the same storm looking for a way out. But there was no easy way out. Our families had already decided for us. Our futures were no longer ours to control. What was left was to find a way, to make the best of a situation that neither of us had chosen. We spoke of rebellion, of standing up to our families, of telling them the truth, that we could not and would not marry without love. But the weight of tradition loomed too large, and we both knew the consequences of defying it. So, we made a decision that changed everything. We would stand together. We would face our families, speak our truth, and fight for what we believed in. And though it felt like an impossible task, we knew it was the only way forward. We could not live our lives based on fear. We could not let tradition suffocate us, and we could not let our hearts be sacrificed in the name of family honor. But even as we prepared to fight, the reality of the situation settled heavily on my shoulders. The pressure was building, and as I looked at her standing before me, I realized just how powerless we truly were. The wedding was already in motion. The guests were arriving. The music was playing, and I had no choice but to walk down that aisle, take her hand, and say the words that would bind us together. The truth was, love had no place here. There was no room for the beauty of choice, no space for the freedom to love without fear. All that remained was duty, and in that moment, duty was everything. And yet, even as the world outside buzzed with excitement, I felt a storm raging inside me. This wasn't love. It wasn't even close. It was a trap, one I had walked into without realizing it. She wasn't the woman I had imagined spending my life with. She was the woman who had ensnared me in her web, the woman who had manipulated me, the woman who had left me with no choice. As I adjusted my tie, I realized just how deep the trap had gone. She had orchestrated this entire scenario, playing me like a pawn in her game. I had thought I was in control, but in the end, she had been the one pulling the strings. And now, as I stood there in front of the mirror, I had no choice but to marry her. The door to the wedding hall creaked open, and I could hear the murmurs of the guests, the soft hum of the music. In that moment, I knew there was no going back. The weight of the decision pressed down on me, and I felt the eyes of the world upon me. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was the truth. This wasn't a marriage of love. It was a marriage of obligation, a marriage forced upon me by tradition, by family, by expectations I had no power to change. The doors opened wide, and I took the first step toward the altar. Each step felt heavier than the last, and with each one I felt the walls closing in around me. But I had made my choice. Or had I? Now, as I stand at the edge of this new chapter, I wonder if I still have a chance to reclaim my future. Could I still find a way out? Could I turn the tide before it's too late? The world may believe I'm walking toward my destiny, but in my heart, I know I'm just walking toward a fate I never asked for. I found myself standing at the crossroads of my life, my heart heavy with the weight of a decision that threatened to undo everything I knew. The music echoed softly from the other side of the door, a reminder of the finality of the moment, and I stood before the mirror, adjusting my suit, as though each movement could somehow delay the inevitable. My reflection stared back at me, a man caught between duty and desire, between love and obligation. I could hear the murmurs from the outside, the excitement building, the guests awaiting the ceremony, unaware of the storm that raged in my soul. But there, in the silence, I could feel the truth settling upon me like a heavy blanket. I was about to marry her, forcefully, against my will. How had I come to this? How had I gone from a man who believed in freedom and choice to one who was bound by tradition, by family, by promises that weren't mine to make? It all began with the first glance, the first spark of attraction, when I met her, innocent, smiling, and full of hope. At first, she was just another person, someone I barely noticed, a stranger in a crowd of faces. But like a shadow that creeps up on you, she began to occupy more of my thoughts. And with each passing day, I found myself sinking deeper into a situation I had no control over. My parents had strong beliefs, unshakable traditions that they held dear. They pushed, they urged, they demanded that I marry her, even when my heart whispered something else. My family's reputation, their name, their legacy, all these things weighed heavily upon me, and I could not ignore their wishes. What kind of son would I be if I defied them? What kind of man would I be if I chose my own happiness over the expectations placed upon me? The pressure mounted, and I could feel my choices slipping away, one by one, until I was left with no room to breathe. In the depths of my despair, I realized something profound, that the love I sought could never be forced. It was not something that could be imposed upon two souls. It was something that blossomed naturally, born from understanding, mutual respect, and choice. And yet, here I was, standing on the precipice of a decision that would affect not only my life, but hers as well. The woman who would become my wife was as much a victim of circumstance as I was. She too had been thrust into a world where tradition ruled, where choice was an illusion, and where love was something dictated by others. I couldn't ignore the nagging thought that this marriage, this forced union, would be nothing more than a breeding ground for resentment.